Miguel Reyes kept his eyes glued to the cracked linoleum tiles beneath his sneakers, timing his steps with the bell as students swarmed the hallways of Westridge High. He moved like a ghost, seen but ignored, his slight 5'6" frame weighed down. Not by his backpack, but by the pronounced limp that made every hallway a battlefield. 15 years old. 2 months into his transfer, and already he'd mastered the art of invisibility. He had to, because places like this didn't forgive weakness. Jason Taylor's voice, low, loud, and always laced with threat, cut through the hallway noise like a buzzsaw. "Hey, Gimpy, where do you think you're going?" Miguel flinched. That voice. Every time it echoed behind him, it was followed by something worse. His heart rate picked up, but he didn't break stride. 28 feet to history. "Class, he could make it, you hear me?" Jason's boots stomped closer. His laugh followed, dragging 2 others with it. Rick Donner and Kevin Walsh, the muscle flanking the mouth. Together, they were the school's apex predators, varsity jackets, crooked grins, unchecked egos. Miguel didn't look up. He just kept moving faster now, 20 feet. A hand gripped his shoulder, tight. He was spun around so fast his bag slipped off. Books exploded onto the floor like a burst piñata. Laughter. Miguel stared at his scattered notebooks, then at his feet. "I'm talking to you, Gimpy," Jason said, towering over him. He leaned in close, reeking of arrogance and cafeteria nachos. "Didn't anyone teach you manners?" "I have class," Miguel replied, voice quiet, steady. Rick kicked one of his notebooks down the hallway like a soccer ball. Kevin cackled. "Oh, he has class, like anyone cares what this freak does." Miguel felt the familiar heat crawl up his neck. He crouched to gather his things, pretending not to hear the giggles, the sneers, the camera clicks from a phone held too high. From the corner of his eye, a figure hesitated. Leave him alone. Lily Chen Jr., top of the class. Smart enough to know better than to speak up. Brave enough to do it anyway. Jason turned to her. "Mind your business, Chen. Unless you want to join the freak show." She faltered, clutched her books tighter. Then kept walking. Miguel didn't blame her. Jason shoved him into the lockers, hard. "See you at lunch, Professor Limp." Miguel gathered the last of his papers and limped into class just as the bell rang. No one said a word. No one offered a hand. He slid into the back row, hands shaking, chest tight. Just 3 more years, he told himself. Just survive. Then he'd never see any of them again. No one in that hallway knew what that limp had cost him, what it had hidden, what it had trained him to become. No one knew what was coming. Not yet. Miguel Reyes wasn't always the quiet kid in the back of the classroom, the one who walked with a limp and kept his head down. There was a time when his name echoed through gymnasiums, whispered among coaches, and etched into tournament brackets, long before puberty hit. That version of Miguel was loud in the way only controlled power could be, not with words, but with presence. It started early. Too early, some said. At just 4 years old, Miguel wasn't sitting in front of cartoons. He was on the mats of Reyes Combat Academy, his father's gym in downtown San Diego, drilling Brazilian jiu-jitsu basics next to grown men twice his size. By 6, he could shrimp out of a full mount before most kids knew how to tie their shoelaces. By 8, he was landing clean combinations on the heavy bag with Muay Thai kicks that echoed like thunder. By 10, he was competing in youth tournaments, sometimes against kids older, always against kids bigger. He didn't win them all, but he learned, and he listened. No one demanded more of him than his father, Gabriel Reyes. Former fighter, world-class, trainer, quiet storm. Miguel idolized him, not just for the titles he held or the respect he commanded, but for the way he never raised his voice, never acted out of ego. Gabriel fought with purpose or not at all. That was the rule. Violence, he used to say, is a tool, not a trophy. You don't take it out to shine in the light, you use it when there's no other option. It wasn't just a lesson in combat. It was a code, a way to live. One Miguel had taken to heart, until the day everything changed. Miguel was 13 when it happened. Just another afternoon at the gym, sweaty gloves, Echoes of leather on mitts, shouts of encouragement from Gabriel, and then chaos, a stray. Bullet from a neighboring shooting range tore through the drywall like paper. 1 second, Miguel was working a clinch drill. The next, he was on the floor, screaming, blood soaking his thigh. The doctors said it was a miracle the bullet hadn't killed him, but it might as well have. The damage was devastating. Shattered femur, torn muscle, nerve trauma. Multiple surgeries, months in a wheelchair, pain that no amount of morphine could blur. He hated the limp, hated the mirror, hated the silence. When other kids his age were sparring, and he was relearning how to stand, there were nights he'd scream into his pillow when Gabriel wasn't looking. Days he avoided the gym completely. He disappeared from the tournament scene. Rumors swirled. Some thought he'd quit. Some said he was scared. They were wrong, because after a year of depression, Miguel came back. Not the same, no, but sharper, more calculating. He couldn't explode off the lead leg like before, but he didn't need to. He developed a style built on leverage, efficiency, and deception. What he lost in speed, he gained in precision. While others threw haymakers, Miguel learned how to breathe through chaos, how to break a wrist with a shrug, how to take down someone, twice his size without ever raising his voice. But one rule remained unchanged. He never used what he knew outside the gym, not after what happened at his old school. The incident wasn't something he liked to talk about. A boy had cornered him. The locker room pushed him, mocked the limp, got too close. Miguel didn't mean to hurt him, not really. But reflexes honed over a decade don't ask for permission. 1 second, the kid was grabbing his hoodie. The next, he was screaming on the floor with a dislocated shoulder. That had been the beginning of the end. The school called it excessive force. His parents called it a fresh start. And Westridge High was supposed to be that start. But it didn't feel fresh. It felt like exile. Here, no one knew Miguel Reyes, the prodigy. No one cared who his father was. All they saw was a limp and a hunched posture. All they heard was silence. And to predators like Jason Taylor, silence was weakness. At first, Miguel tried to follow his father's code. Don't engage, don't escalate, just survive. He avoided eye contact, took longer routes to class, ate lunch near the emergency exit, said yes sir and no ma'am to every adult in the building. But Westridge wasn't built for patience. It was built on hierarchy. And nothing made you a target faster than standing alone with your head down and your limp visible. Jason and his crew didn't start big. That's never how bullies work. They started with casual insults in the hallway. Gimpy, cripple, special ed. Then came the accidental shoulder bumps, the snatched notebooks, the whisper laughs behind his back that got louder by the day. Miguel absorbed it all in silence. But each shove, each insult, each laugh, it chipped away at the promise he'd made. The promise not to fight. And lately, he could feel it. Something dark coiling inside his chest. A pressure, a warning. Because when you train your whole life to stay controlled, you also learn what happens when that control breaks. And it was breaking. He just hoped, prayed, Jason wouldn't be the one to find out what that looked like. Not yet. The cafeteria at Westridge High was alive with its usual midday noise. Plastic trays slapping onto tables, bursts of laughter from the athlete's corner, and the squeak of worn sneakers on linoleum floors. But Miguel Reyes wasn't listening. He sat alone, hunched at the corner table by the emergency exit, trying to make his bland pasta last longer than the silence around him. His physics notebook lay open beside the tray, equations scribbled neatly in black ink. He wasn't hiding. Exactly, just disappearing in plain sight. But the silence didn't last. Miguel didn't need to look up to know Jason was approaching. He could feel it, the way the conversation shifted around the room, the subtle ripple of attention being pulled in one direction. That's what power did. It drew oxygen from the air and left everyone else breathless. Well, if it isn't Professor Gimpy, Jason's voice boomed as he dropped into the seat across from Miguel, flanked by Rick and Kevin. Miguel didn't respond. He marked his place in his notes and closed the notebook slowly, tucking it under his tray, like he was shielding something sacred. Experience had taught him that schoolwork was often the first casualty. "Studying hard?" Jason asked, grinning wide. "Trying to earn that scholarship?" Miguel said nothing. Rick reached across the table and flicked his forehead. "We asked you a question." Miguel's jaw clenched. "Yes," he replied, quiet but firm. "Physics quiz." "Ooh," Kevin mocked, reaching for Miguel's milk. He opened it and drank without permission. "Bet you think you're smarter than everyone." Miguel looked at the empty carton and said evenly, "No, just trying to pass." Jason leaned forward, his shadow swallowing Miguel's tray. "You know what I think," he said slowly. "I think you do think you're better than us. Sitting here all quiet and mysterious like you're above it all?" Several students were watching now, sensing that something might happen. A few had already pulled out their phones. "Prove it," Jason said, pointing toward a freshman girl. "2 tables away. Go ask her out, right now, loud enough for everyone to hear." Miguel's eyes flicked toward the girl, unsuspecting, alone, chewing on the end of her straw. "No," Miguel said, voice like steel. Jason blinked. "No? Did Gimpy just tell me no?" "I'm not doing that to her," Miguel said, already, measuring the exits, noting the distance between tables, the space between him and freedom. "Find someone else to amuse you." For a second, Jason looked genuinely surprised. Then his face hardened. "Oh, you're definitely doing it. Or we'll tell everyone how you were crying in the bathroom last week." It was a lie. Miguel knew it. So did Jason. But lies only needed an echo to become gospel in high school. "Make something up if you want," Miguel said as he stood grabbing his tray. "I'm not bothering someone else just so you can feel important." What happened next moved faster than thought. Jason shoved the tray into Miguel's chest, pasta sauce bursting across his shirt in a red splash. Miguel staggered back, then Kevin swept his foot behind Miguel's bad leg. Miguel fell. The room gasped as he hit the floor hard, pain radiating from his thigh, but his face stayed calm, almost cold. Jason stood over him, grinning. "Oops," Gimpy took a tumble. Miguel began to push himself up, but then Rick stepped forward, deadpan. "I've always wondered," he said, "if you could kick a field goal with someone's head." Laughter. Rick drew his leg back like a punter lining up a 50-yarder, and then time stopped. Miguel's body moved before his mind caught up. Instead of dodging away, he rolled into the kick, throwing off Rick's timing. As the foot passed harmlessly overhead, Miguel's hands locked onto the ankle. One twist. Leverage, momentum. Rick flipped over like a rag doll, his body crashing down on a table behind them that instantly collapsed under his weight. The cafeteria fell into stunned silence. Miguel was already on his feet. No hesitation. No limp. His stance was clean, weight-centered, hands relaxed but deadly, eyes sharp. The transformation was surgical. Kevin froze. Jason's smile vanished. "What the hell?" Jason muttered, backing up slightly. Miguel didn't answer. He didn't have to. Jason's pride snapped. He lunged forward with a wild punch. Miguel slipped it with ease, pivoting lightly on the leg everyone assumed was weak. Jason's momentum carried him forward, and that was when Miguel struck, a palm to the sternum. Not a punch, just enough force to knock the wind out of him. Jason staggered back, coughing, breathless. "Don't," Miguel said, the word cutting through the air like a blade. Kevin broke from his stupor and charged. It was clumsy. Miguel stepped inside, hooked his foot behind Kevin's ankle, and let gravity do the rest. Kevin hit the floor, dazed. 3 bullies, 3 precise moves, no punches, no injuries, just dominance. Miguel stood alone, surrounded by a ring of silence and cell phones. Students gawked. No one moved. A few mouths hung open. The myth had just been born. And that's when the teachers arrived. Vice Principal Donovan barreling through the crowd, face flushed. Miguel let his hands drop to his sides, his breathing steady. He wasn't proud. He wasn't Afraid, but he knew what came next. He'd broken the promise, and now the real fight was about to begin. The plastic chair outside Principal Wagner's office was cold, unforgiving. Miguel Reyes sat still, his shirt still stained with tomato sauce, the ache in his thigh pulsing beneath the surface like a second heartbeat. Across from him sat his father, silent, immovable, a fortress in a collared shirt. 2 hours had passed since the cafeteria exploded into chaos. Inside the office, muffled voices drifted through the door. Phrases broke through the wall like tiny hammers. 3 against 1. Clear case of self-defense. Zero tolerance policy. Miguel wasn't sure which part made him feel worse. They hadn't spoken much since Gabriel Reyes had walked into the school. Just a quiet exchange. Are you hurt? No, sir. Did you start it? No, sir. Did you finish it? Yes, sir. His father had simply nodded, then placed a firm hand on Miguel's shoulder, an anchor in a sea of noise, before disappearing into the principal's office. Now the door clicked open. Principal Wagner stepped out, tall, stern, with silver gray, hair pulled into a bun that looked like it could cut glass. She gestured at Miguel. Inside. Miguel entered and took the seat next to his father. Across the desk sat Vice Principal Donovan, red-faced and tense, and Ms. Patel, the school counselor, calm and observant. We've been discussing your situation, Principal Wagner began. Her tone was measured, but the weight in her words was unmistakable. Mr. Donovan tapped a thick manila folder. We've received 17 witness statements, plus footage from the cafeteria cameras. The accounts are surprisingly consistent. He sounded almost annoyed by the consistency. Ms. Patel leaned forward, her voice softer. Miguel, why didn't you tell anyone you were being bullied? The question landed like a needle. Miguel looked up. It wouldn't have helped. You don't know that, she replied gently. With respect, Ms. Patel, Miguel said, voice even. I do know that. Jason Taylor's father is on the school board. His uncle is the football coach. Most teachers look the other way when varsity athletes misbehave. Mr. Donovan opened his mouth to object, but Wagner raised a hand. Miguel continued, eyes steady. I've been here 2 months. I've seen other kids try to speak up. Nothing happens except they get targeted worse. Silence filled the room. Regardless, Principal Wagner finally said, fighting is against school policy. Zero tolerance. Gabriel shifted in his chair. With respect, Principal Wagner, he said, his tone polite but firm. My son didn't fight. He defended himself. There's a difference. Wagner sighed. I understand. The footage is clear. Rick Donner attempted to kick him in the head while he was on the ground. That alone warrants serious consequences. So we agree, Gabriel said, folding his hands. The only violence Miguel used was to neutralize harm. No broken bones, no retaliation. That's true, Ms. Patel added. What's more interesting is how he did it. She turned to Miguel. How long have you trained in martial arts? Miguel hesitated. Since I was 4, Mr. Donovan blinked. Which explains how a student with a disability took down 3. Larger boys without throwing a single punch. Principal Wagner tapped her pen. Here's what's going to happen. Miguel sat up straighter. Jason Taylor, Rick Donner, and Kevin Walsh will each receive 2-week suspensions. 1 month of detention. They'll be removed from all extracurriculars for the remainder of the semester. Miguel almost couldn't believe what he was hearing. Wagner turned to him. You will receive 3 days of in-school suspension, not for defending yourself, but for not reporting ongoing harassment. That silence allowed the situation to escalate. Miguel nodded slowly. It was less than he expected, but he understood the message. You'll also attend weekly sessions with Ms. Patel for the next month. Yes, ma'am. There's one more thing, Wagner said, turning to Gabriel. Your father has made an unusual but compelling proposal. Miguel looked at him, curious. Gabriel finally smiled, just barely. I've offered to run a 6-week self-defense program for students and staff, he said. Focus will be on awareness, de-escalation, and self-protection. Physical intervention will only be a last resort. We'll pilot the program starting next week, Wagner added. And you, she looked directly at Miguel, will assist your father. Think of it as community service. Miguel blinked. Me? Yes, Gabriel said. Who better to show that limitations don't mean weakness? Miguel felt something, stir deep inside, something light, unexpected, hope. When they left the office, the hallway felt different, not safer, but more bearable. He'd broken a promise, and yet somehow the system had bent without breaking. The cost of silence was real. But so was the power of standing your ground, and maybe for once someone had listened. When Miguel Reyes returned to school after his 3-day in-school suspension, Westridge High felt different. It wasn't louder, it wasn't quieter, but there was a shift in the air, like the school itself had taken a breath and was holding. He stepped through the front doors wearing a clean hoodie, fresh jeans, and the same quiet focus that had always defined him. Except now people noticed. Heads turned as he passed. Whispers trailed behind him. Phones buzzed with clips that had already gone viral within school group chats. In some versions of the story, he'd flipped all 3 bullies at once. In others, he hadn't even touched them, just stared them down with some kind of Jedi power. Reality didn't matter. Myth had taken over. In his first class, the teacher paused when she saw him, then offered a small nod. Some students stared, others looked down. 1 or 2 smiled with something like respect. Miguel didn't say much. He just opened his notebook and took notes like always. By lunchtime, it was official. He was no longer invisible. As he entered the cafeteria, a momentary hush spread, followed by a rise in chatter. He made his way toward his usual table, the far-off corner near the emergency exit, except this time it was occupied. 4 freshmen sat there, talking nervously. They froze when they saw him. One of them spoke up quickly. Sorry, is this your spot? We can move. Miguel shook his head. It's fine, room for 1 more. They shuffled to make space, eyes wide, not entirely sure what kind of legend they'd just invited to join them. Miguel sat down, opened his lunch, and started eating like nothing had changed. But everything had. That afternoon, between classes, Lily Chen caught up with him. She didn't hesitate this time. No nerves, just purpose. You've been holding out on us, she said, matching his stride. Miguel gave a half smile. No one asked. Fair, she replied, eyes scanning him with new understanding. For what it's worth, I'm glad you stood up to them. Jason's crew has been untouchable for years. Not anymore. He nodded, not needing to say anything. We have a study group. Library, Thursdays after school, you should come. I'll think about it, Miguel said, meaning it. But the most surprising moment came 2 days later, by the soda machine near the lunch line. Rick Donner stood there, struggling to unscrew the cap on a bottle with one hand. His other arm was still in a sling. Miguel saw him, could have walked past, could have let him struggle. Instead, he walked up and asked, Need help with that? Rick flinched. Actual fear flashed across his face before he masked it with a scowl. I'm fine, he muttered. Miguel shrugged and turned away. Wait, Rick called out. Miguel turned back. Actually, yeah, thanks. He handed Miguel the bottle. Miguel opened it, handed it back. Their eyes met, not as enemies, not quite as equals, but as 2 teenagers who had both felt pain in different forms. How's the shoulder? Rick adjusted the sling. Doc says another week in this thing, then PT. Coach says I might miss the rest of the season. That sucks, Miguel said, and meant it. Rick looked down. Guess I had it coming. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. Rick hesitated, voice lower now. That thing you did in the cafeteria is that something people can learn? Miguel studied him for a moment. Most of it. With practice. Rick nodded slowly. Your dad's workshop, it's real, right? Tuesdays and Thursdays? Yeah. When this heals. Rick let the sentence trail off. Maybe, Miguel said. It was as close to reconciliation as either of them could get, and it was enough. 3 days later, Jason finally appeared, alone. Miguel was grabbing his books from his locker after final bell when he sensed someone behind him. He turned, and there he was. Jason looked different. Smaller somehow. Not physically, but the arrogance was gone. "Got a minute?" he asked. Miguel shut his locker slowly, then leaned against it. "What do you want?" Jason looked down. "I'm supposed to apologize to you. Part of my behavioral improvement plan. So yeah, sorry." The words were dry, hollow. Miguel raised an eyebrow. "That it?" Jason's jaw tensed. "What do you want, man? I said it." "No," Miguel said calmly. "You said you're supposed to apologize. That's not the same." Jason exhaled. "Fine. I'm sorry I called you names. I'm sorry we messed with you. I'm sorry Rick tried to kick your head in. Happy now?" Miguel considered him. "Why'd you do it?" Jason blinked. "What? Why me? Why anyone? What do you get out of making people miserable?" Jason opened his mouth, then closed it. "I don't know. It's just how things are." "No," Miguel said, "it's how you chose to make them." The silence between them stretched. Jason finally looked away. "Look, we're not going to be friends. I don't need your friendship." Miguel replied, "Just your absence." Jason nodded. "Yeah, deal." He paused, then added, "That move on Rick was badass." Miguel didn't smile. "Thanks." And that was the end of it. Tuesday afternoon arrived. The gym was filled. Over 40 students lined up on mats, 5 teachers among them. Some were there out of curiosity, others out of fear, and a few maybe out of hope. Gabriel stood at the front, calm as always. "The best fight," he told them, "is the one you avoid." Miguel stood beside him, ready. Throughout the next hour, he demonstrated techniques, how to escape wrist grabs, how to fall without injury, how to breathe through panic. He explained each step in simple language, never bragging, never raising his voice. When Gabriel asked for a volunteer to test a hold, Lily raised her hand. Miguel gave her a small nod as she gripped his wrist with both hands. He showed the class how to break free using only leverage, not strength. The students watched. Some took notes. Others simply stared, seeing him not as a kid with a limp, but as someone in control, someone capable, someone they wanted to become. When the session ended, Miguel helped roll up the mats. Gabriel looked over at him. "You did well," he said. Coming from Miguel Reyes, that was a full speech. Miguel looked around the empty gym. "Feels strange." "What does?" "Being seen," Gabriel nodded. "It's easier to hide. Takes courage to be known." And in that moment, Miguel understood something deeper. He hadn't just fought back, he'd stepped forward, and that made all the difference. Top of form. The sun dipped low behind the school buildings, casting a golden hue across the pavement and playground. For the first time since arriving at Westridge High, Miguel wasn't rushing to escape its walls. He wasn't shrinking in the crowd or dodging shoulders in the hallway. He walked tall, still with a limp, yes, but now every step felt earned. He spotted his father's car in the pickup lane just behind the Chen family's sedan. Lily stood beside it, loading her backpack into the trunk. She looked up as she saw him and grinned. "Hey, Miguel," she called. "We're getting pizza before the student council meeting. Want to join?" He blinked. It was such a simple invitation, so ordinary, and yet it felt monumental. He smiled back, genuine, open. "Yeah," he said, "I'd like that." As he walked toward her, something shifted inside. The limp was still there. It would always be there. But for the first time, it didn't define him. It was just one thread in the fabric of who he was, woven in, not overshadowing the rest. He wasn't the broken kid, wasn't the invisible loner, wasn't even just the fighter anymore. He was Miguel Reyes' son, student, fighter, teacher, friend, whole. At the pizzeria, he sat surrounded by laughter and warmth. Lily, a few other students from the workshop, even 2 freshmen from his old lunch table. The circle around him had grown, not because he demanded it, but because he earned it. And yet, as he took a bite of his slice, a question lingered in the back of his mind. What now? Because if Westridge High had taught him anything, it was that power never disappears. It only shifts. He'd taken down Jason's crew. But not everyone was ready to accept the new order. Not everyone welcomed change, especially those who'd built their comfort on silence, fear, and control. And somewhere in some quiet corner of the school, someone was already planning, watching, waiting. Miguel didn't know who yet, but he could feel it. The tension, the resistance. The weight of becoming a symbol wasn't just pride, it was responsibility. And not all fights happen in cafeterias. End. Screen call to action. Miguel may have earned the respect of Westridge High, but power, once challenged, rarely fades quietly. One student watched everything, and they've got a plan. Next episode, the shadow behind the applause is stay tuned, because the real test of leadership is surviving what comes after the spotlight fades.